Well, Pommy, it's time to have a real conversation, mate, about real life stuff, obviously pertaining to football. But I think there's an interesting subplot to the news that we've had over the last few days, obviously with positive test with Joel Smith and, Elijah Hollands, the news that he's going to face a court hearing over possession of an illicit substance. So I think it opens itself up to a broader discussion around drugs in sport and the problem, and can you fix it? How do you fix it? And what to do? So maybe we'll start with you, mate. Where does your mind go with this?
I think it's always an interesting one because, such as everything in life, people are genuinely indecisive on a lot of things until it actually is in their public eye. I think a great example is COVID. We use that phrase, protecting the community, a lot because someone went and got an inoculation effectively. But on the whole, you'd never seen these people talk about the rising rate of homelessness, the rising rate of petty crime and things like that. So people genuinely don't care about anything until they're faced with it. And when that happens, genuinely, your opinion is very uninformed, in my opinion, on that, because obviously, if you've not been worried about it before, suddenly it shouldn't be. And I think with drugs in sport, I think you've only got to use Australia as a catchment. So they did a great survey, the government did, on drugs and mental health in 2021. And what they found from 2019 is drugs in this country is actually decreasing on the whole of recreational use. However, it is increasing above the norm for 18 to 25-year-olds. And then you look at sportsmen, what age are they? They're generally in that happy medium bracket. They have more surplus income. Most of us have electricity to pay for, so things like that probably stop you. However, with these, they've got opportunity, they have money, and genuinely speaking, I think it's a dangerous thing to say that this is a football problem. This is a society problem. This is the difference between Elijah Hollands and Derek, who works in the fish and chip shop on a Saturday, is one's an elite sportsman in the public eye, and the other guy is the guy who gives you your flake and chips on a Friday afternoon.
I think oftentimes the line between athlete and human gets blurred, and the athlete is held to a different standard to the regular human being. I think oftentimes you'll see rhetoric around, oh, X is paid this much, so therefore that means that he or she can't experience life as what I do. When the reality is, I think there are people a lot older than even those who have retired from professional sport. If we stick to the AFL, I think that people are still trying to figure themselves out beyond 30, 35, 40. And I think that's where the rise in, turning to substances, whether it's illicit, whether it's alcohol, whatever the case may be, that's where these themes and issues come to fruition.
I think it's a three-stage process. I hate role model because role model is such a loose word. And I always find it really ironic that human beings want role models that are perfect when the world isn't perfect. I'm 38 and my older brother committed suicide at my age, right? I have a beautiful wife, beautiful kids. My life is okay. That's not fair because same upbringing, same route in life. So life is inherently unfair. So we want role models who are perfect. And I think that makes them totally unrelatable. So a great role model we have at the club is Sam Doherty. How he acts with things, that's a role model. But for his path in life is probably totally obscure to a young 12-year-old boy whose dad has left home. He lives in a commission housing flat. He's picked on at school. That for him is an unattainable role model. He needs a role model like Dustin Martin. And it's funny when you mentioned money. That seems to be the common misconception that money makes you happy. But you have Dustin Martin in 2018 doing an interview that is literally hidden by the AFL, talking about him wanting to commit suicide because he had achieved everything. And the unattainable goal is what got him out of bed every morning. Now he'd achieved it. His brain was like, well, what can I do? Like, I've achieved what I thought was impossible. And I think it's one of them things that we have to look at where, for me, I would rather have a role model like Elijah Hollins, who, let's say, okay, we've got to remember as well, he's charged with possession.
Yeah.
Right. He's not El Chapo. Do you know what I mean? He could have walked into a pub with his mates and he's got a baggie. Yes, it's wrong, but you've got to put it in perspective. Do you know what I mean? He's not distributing. He's not dealing to children. He's made a mistake, as far as we know. And there's probably 1,000 people out there in a nightclub in Rebs this Saturday in the same situation. The cops just won't arrest them. So
Correct.
I'd rather have a role model like Elijah in my life, and I would rather see him have a 300 game career and he's made a mistake and then he comes out the other end. And that's a role model I want to push onto my children. They're the ones that get me excited, because we always think we're in a society now where we chastise and we find fault. We go back through Twitter 20 years ago to chastise and bring someone down. We're not in a society where we look at the story and look at the end. We're always looking to drag people down and then put people on pedestals, then to remove them. And for me, if you're a young man in this country, my brain would say, I'm only going to get so successful that you're going to rip it away from me. So why don't I just make a mistake now? I might as well make the mistake. You're going to chastise me eventually.
Yeah. I think where an athlete is held to a different standard is based on their experience. So you've been a professional athlete at a point in time, bit different to the AFL because you're playing a sport where it's just you that actually goes out and performs. But the pressures of identity, particularly early in a young man's career, I mean, you build up, you realize a dream, you want to be a professional footballer. All of a sudden, that is your identity. You are a professional footballer. You're an athlete. Shut up and kick the ball. Shut up and dribble. And I think these kids that come through the system are no different to me in that we're still trying to figure out who we are and where we fit in this place in the world, on top of having the pressure of their identity being forged into, are you a best 22 player? Why aren't you playing? Are you ever going to be good enough? And there's this warped perception of what it means to be, what it means to understand who you are and what your identity is. And then you think about, they're in a realm where it could end tomorrow, an injury, delisting, whatever. And then you're in the real world, and you have to go through that process all over again. So I find it really curious. I don't know if it's just internet culture and, making fun and making jokes and trolling, but I found it interesting, the reaction to Joel Smith. And then when it happens in the Carlton backyard, sort of, with Elijah Hollins, how the narrative flips.
Mate, it's always funny until it's happened in your doorstep. Do you know what I mean? As a former drug user and an addict myself, I'm sure my father model, my granddad, would have 100% convinced himself I would never be that person. Yeah. And then one day it happened. And, I think this is where society has a responsibility. My granddad used to tell me about the war, and he used to use the famous quote that young men die while old people talk. And he used to say that is a bigger reflection on society. And he used to be of this belief that younger people are weaker. It's just the leaders progressively get weaker and talk a lot of smack, that it's the young person who has to deal with it. And that is why society is getting weaker, because people just want to make it weaker. And so then the next generation is constantly fighting a battle that is unattainable with someone older. And I think you've nailed it with social media. Do you know what I mean? Joel Smith, I saw a lot of comments. It was funny. Do you know what I mean? Oh, Melbourne, Clayton Oliver, Goodwin, all these rumors. And I think of it bigger picture, right? Bigger picture. If I'm a young 14-year-old man going through what I did when I was 14, I'm looking at older people, right, for inspiration and how society reacts. And in this country, it is amazing that everyone thinks the drug addict is that guy asking you for a lighter on Friday night. Having gone through rehab, that drug addict that you actually meet is a lawyer, is a doctor, is a copper. These are real people, and they're generally the ones that do get forgotten about society because they have the fugazi, like me as a golfer. oh, Dan's doing all right with himself. And people forget these people mingle with the common man, the common folk. Elijah probably has mates who are at uni, hitting schoolies. Do you know what I mean? They're not professional athletes. So he's around people that probably in their society, oh, it's just a cheeky line on a Friday night. And we all know them. We all work with them people. For him, it's been normalized, but it's not normal because he's an elite sportsman. He's a human being. He makes mistakes. And
Figuring it
where
out.
I come from, the only person I was ever told that never made a mistake was Jesus, and we crucified him. He died without sin, one person. So my opinion is I have made many mistakes. I can't criticize a young man for making a mistake, but what I can do is I can preach love, tolerance, and forgiveness, and hope that with that, the culture drives him to a better place, and he comes out the other end a much wiser and much more well-rounded and a much stronger human being. And that's the only way you become that is through making mistakes. And you're a moron if you think you're born perfect with all the knowledge. It's the mistakes that educate you.
Correct.
Your wins make you weaker, genuinely speaking, in life.
Yeah. There's a few things that are interesting for me here. If we bring it back to a footy / Carlton conversation, I feel like a few years ago, a lot of us, the fan base, would have turned away and not wanted us to even go down the path of drafting a player who had found himself in a situation like this. I feel like this is a testament to where the club has gotten to, the culture that it believes it now has, to bring him into an environment that's going to allow him to flourish. And then the second part as well, I think a lot of people don't really understand what it's like to go to court and appear in a courtroom at 21 years old. I've been there as a, representing 21-year-olds or 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds. That is in my view, that's one of the best. It's going to be one of the best experiences for someone like Elijah, whether it's him or the next young player, to go into a courtroom. There's a feeling about it. He's going to have a real fork in the road moment, and I think it's going to only motivate him to remind him the path that he chooses. So, like, on the one hand, yes, he is a human being. He has human beings as friends who are from all walks of life, but he now finds himself in a situation where he can forge a path for himself through his athletic endeavors, to not go down the same path as what his environment is. And that's a hard choice for someone to make, because, I've had it in my life as well, where you've got to make a choice between who your friends are and what's good for your well-being. And sometimes your environment isn't good for your well-being. And that's the hard thing to do, because you have this sense of loyalty to your people. Now, I don't know the circumstances around the possession with Elijah in particular. I don't know. But I think broadly speaking, a lot of it can be drawn to the environment in which you keep.
Can be. I mean, in my personal experience of drugs, it was a conversation my pop had about drugs and how I came to live with him. And it stuck with me for so many years that my granddad was the guy that I went to, that it made me scared to talk to him when I dabbled in it. And me being the arrogant teenager that I was, thought I could get on top of the situation myself. And before you know it, you do more. And that's why I think Elijah's in a very fortunate position that he's a young man. He has a beautiful family. He has a beautiful football club now to protect him. There is a lot of people, probably someone watching this very video now, that doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And this is where we need to use this as an example as society, that we have to be that person. So when you're going out on Twitter and going, druggy scum, don't have him, things like that. And then you look to the government, and we've recently had a voice election because we want the government to step in and do something. Because the society is so bad, everyone's struggling. It's hard to get people on the yes side. And this is the same with this. This isn't a government fix. This is a society fix. Society should be fixing these things. We should be pillars of our community where we're like, look, if you're having a bad time, come and see me and I'll do it with no judgment. And until that removes, and we always use this, the AFL needs to crack down. The government needs to crack down on drugs. it's always going to be there, because lo and behold, drugs has existed since the dawn of human history. And that is a really important thing that we need to do as a football club. We've taken this guy in and we've backed our culture, and people get confused. I've heard people saying, oh, Elijah's there now, the culture's going to be ruined. Well, you haven't got a culture. If that's the case, if a 22-year-old man can dispel it, you haven't got. And that's because people get culture confused with two big things: boys club and two, winning. And culture has nothing to do with either, right? And it's amazing how these good cultures disintegrate when they start losing. That is a sign of, now you were winning, so everyone was happy. Oh, now you're losing. That person bullied you. That person said something. And that's the grand scheme of society. It's utopia until you realize it's not. And until everyone puts their hands up and go, I'm the problem, we're always going to have this.
Yeah. It's not banter. It's not banter to use that to use these situations to form a view on that player and what they mean in the scheme of things. Now, what's your take on the drug policy within the AFL and how it's run, the 3-strike policy?
Ridiculous. I think I think the media and the AFL are only encouraging this problem. If you are trying to keep everything under wraps, you're doing two things: showing the greater public that with privilege and opportunity comes protection, which is dangerous because not everyone has that. But big two here, you're protecting your asset and your business over the human being. And Ben Cousins is a great example, right? Ben Cousins was a very mixed up young man who had all the talent in the world. And West Coast, quite openly, and fair play to them, they've admitted it since, that they went out of their way to protect it and keep it from the public eye. And that's because success overrode the human being. And thank Christ, Ben Cousins now in his older age has got right. But that's the risk you are taking. Not all young men, and this is what annoys me with the phrase, it's a bit of weed, it's just a line. Some people, it's not just a line. Some people, it is the gateway to bigger things. And ultimately, you said there, banter. I'd like to see all these people laughing at it and making witty hashtags on Joel Smith. See how you'd laugh if that was your son and you find him overdosed with rigor mortis. See if you're still going to make a witty little fucking hashtag then. Bet you're not. Exactly. And I bet you're one of the worst people in the world who would be on Twitter crying about it, wanting forgiveness. And unfortunately, you don't deserve forgiveness if that's the way you treat people. Like, you've got to always link everything back to yourself. And I'm not perfect. I've made many mistakes and I have fallen short of this in my life. But on the whole, I try and learn from my mistakes and learn from my consequences. And there will be young men out there who won't have the fortune of what Elijah has, someone to give him a second chance. And he's got a second chance, a physical one. And that's the biggest thing in the world. When someone welcomes you back in your heart, that is so much powerful when you make a mistake. Deliverance is the best feeling in the world.
That's where the Clayton Oliver talk was a little different. I didn't follow the story so closely as a Melbourne supporter, but there was this feeling of who's really got his back. It's almost like he was given to the wolves of society.
And today we have a report that because he was pissed off, he's messed with people's windscreen wipers. And this is the people. These are the people. These are your Sam McClures, your other journalists who 1 minute preach mental health and well-being, but the next can't wait to tweet when one of these people screw up. They can't because they know it's clicks. And unfortunately, we live in a society where it's a lot better about our sad little lives when someone doing better than us fails. And that's the miserable thing. Why do you think 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, there is adverts for feeding starving Africans? It's not on at 8:30 at night when people who have worked a full day with disposable income are there. It's because it makes people who are probably unemployed, single mothers, people struggling, having hardship, see it, and suddenly they think, oh, there's worse people in the world than me. My life's better. That's what we do. Do you know what I mean? We chastise these people. And a great example is Jack Ginnivan. He came out And he said when he did drugs, when they asked him for the explanation, I had a few beers with the boys and I made some stupid choices. He was chastised for it because evidently it lacked remorse and empathy. Are you kidding me? Every person who's ever messed up as a young male, I only speak for me as a young male, was because I was pissed. Do you know what I mean? I didn't do lines at 16 and 17 because I was sober and at the family meal. I did it when I was with my mates, 8 beers in, with my shirt off, singing, YMCA. It was a bad choice because I was drunk. And they're the examples we need to show kids. Intelligent people make stupid choices under the influence. And the other thing we see in the media is they push the mental health card, and it derides mental health. Everyone's an addict when they're caught with drugs. Everyone is mentally unhealthy when they make a mistake. The problem is it devalues what it is. And I would love some of these sportsmen to go, you know what? I'm on 6 figures a year, baby, in the Gold Coast with the boys, having a few beers. I made a mistake and I need to wise up and mature. And that is powerful. And when people do that, it's when the media need to encourage that this is a normal thing. People make mistakes. And now what society needs to do is wrap their arms around them so they don't make the mistake, because hate will lead from being caught with possession to being 32 and overdosing. That's how it works. That's how quickly it works.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I mean, look, listen, I think the message is the right one. I feel like the older I get, the more pessimistic I get about the world. I think that's generally what happens. But I feel like because of the way in which, the nature in which we report on people's shortcomings and the nature in which we are ready to not only have reports of shortcomings, but how quick we are to read and engage in content of people's shortcomings, it's more of a reflection of where we are as a people. I mean, you look at the content game. If you wanted to tell someone how can you become popular quickly, you would say create highly strung, highly emotional content, lambast as much as you can, make as much of a dick of yourself as much as you can, because that is entertainment.
Mate, I think you've nailed it. I mean, I think you can associate that with so much things in life. Do you know what I mean? You only got to see Twitter and social, and I don't want to use the word virtual signaling because I don't agree in it. I think everyone should preach love, but you've got to question yourself. How many people make these tweets about things in current affairs, but then actually fucking do something about it in life? Like, are they devoting time, manpower to educate? And we are in a society, I think the voice is a great thing. A lot of miseducation and a lot of emotive words we use from both sides. And I always see it as an opportunity of education. So for me, there's things I feel strongly about. Drugs and mental health of young men is my number one priority in life. When people say to me, oh, you're an idiot for doing drugs, I'm excited because then it's a chance to educate, share my experience, share their experience, and hopefully both of us leave with a better understanding of why one is so anti-drugs, where a bit me, I'm more willing to try and help and go, well, why has he done drugs? What's the story? How can we stop the story becoming a bad ending? And I think that's where society has a huge responsibility. And I think Darcy Moore as a leader with Jack Ginnivan was the perfect dad when he said, this is a detriment on the football club, and maybe time now for us as a leadership group and senior players to be more open and more approachable with our young players, because we've obviously let Jack down. Now, it was Jack who did the drugs. He's to blame and he has to take the consequences. But also, it's a chance for the Collingwood Football Club to educate themselves on maybe laughing that Jack was pissed at the Copeland Trophy is aiding his behaviour, where a wise adult would pull him to one side and go, Jack, you've had 8 beers in 2 hours, mate. Are you okay? Is everything all right, mate? Maybe calm it down. Tell you what, have some water with me. And that's where society changes. We are in a society where it's, oh, let's find out what someone tweeted 5 years ago and then chastise them, not pull them to one side. And coming from the Romany culture, we have circles. And that's where you educate, circles of education. Our flag is a wheel, meaning the learning never ends. meaning the learning never ends. And we have lost that older man pulling a kid to one side and going, you know what, I understand why you do this. I understand. I was a young man once, and this is what I learned. And sharing them stories instead, it's I'm perfect, you're not. And I'll tell you what, any young men watching out there, every mistake you can make, right, I have probably made. There's a few things I haven't done. Nothing that will give me more than 10 years in prison, but I've made a lot of fucking errors, a lot of errors that I'm not proud of, but I am proud that I learned from them. And it's normal. It's normal to not be okay. It's normal to fuck up. It's good to
Mate,
fuck up.
we are in this existence trying to figure it out as the world changes rapidly around us, and what we came to know to be changes, and the lines get blurred. I mean, you and me both, mate, made mistakes that I thought were irreversible. But yeah, I think it's at some point there needs to come a space for the maturity of how we deal with our foot. I mean, I'm talking more specifically about footy players and the AFL landscape, landscape, but it does extend to the rest of the world. So we'll see. I think this is an evolving space. What is one of the solutions on how we can really deal with this, with the next situation will come? What's the ideal solution?
I think in a sporting sphere, we've got to understand that these players are under incredible pressure. No longer is this the 1980s and the 90s. And I've seen comments like Sticks used to say this and stuff. Sticks comes from a different time where on a Wednesday afternoon, you could go to your local pub, have a couple of beers, chat up a young lady. No one knew about it. Nowadays, these
filming. No, exactly right, man.
Yeah, nowadays, one of these players goes into calls and farts and doesn't say thank you to the shop assistant. He's vilified. So we need to have, I think, better education from the players of the trials and tribulations of what is coming in, which they are doing in the draftees. You speak to them now, they're getting social media training. And it's quite funny when you speak to the draftees, you know what the social media training is. And this just shows you how bad we are as humanity. Like when people say, oh, I'm disappointed with our country, you should be more disappointed with the fact that 16-year-old boys are being told to delete their social media footprint and start a new one in case they've ever said something that may upset someone when they were 14 and 15. That's where we are. One of their social media training is avoid any evidence, which is dangerous in itself, because I am a believer that we should encourage the openness of mistakes, and that when there is a mistake, there is a pathway for redemption, and there has to be a documented one. So I would get rid of this 3 strike rule. I would say that the first strike is 6 months banned from playing. In that system there, they go and work in rehab centres. They go and see what real people who are on minimum wage, or heaven forbid Centrelink, or heaven forbid on the streets, how they have to face their life. It's all right being an elite footballer. 6 months' time, you're banned. 6-figure salary, baby. You know what I mean? Rent's paid, missus is happy, kids are fed. Might not be if you lose your job with drugs for a normal person, and a proper education of society. But then the media needs to change. Stop finding the stories. Look at the tweets. Look at during the trade period, Tom Morris, Sam McClure, their tweets are littered with grammatical errors, make no sense, because they want to be first. They want to break it. They don't want to get the facts right. They want to break the innuendo. And football clubs need to protect their players better. We don't have to hide from it. We need to, you can quite easily present a player and go, this player's fucked up, but we love him. We're going to help him. And a solidarity and an explanation. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Carlton Football Club were quick, round 12. Oh, please don't spit on us. Oh, it hurts our feelings. We're together. They turned a negative into a positive. In it together. Do you know what I mean? Hashtag stronger together. Why can't football clubs, why are they scared of this? Like, fuck your brand, fuck your sponsors. These are human beings. And if a player will take their life, I will guarantee you by 2025, I reckon a player will take their life. And you know what? No one will say this, but it'll be the media and the AFL community that has the blood on their hands. It'll be the blood on the hands of the people.
Just to circle back, 6 months for like a first strike. So currently what we have is strike one, you remain, the whole situation remains anonymous. I believe there's a fine. Strike two, your name's made public. I believe it's a 4-match suspension. Strike three, 12-match suspension. I guess the next question is, should this be treated as a mental health issue or a welfare issue, broadly speaking? I feel like 6 months is just a bit too much, but by the same token, that is absolutely a deterrent. There was a study done, I think, in 2014, where they studied athletes and they tested them in season and off season to see how many times an illicit substance appeared. And one of the studies that I saw, it was found that the more testing was done, the more of a deterrent it was. So you're saying the punishment should be more of a deterrent than the actual mechanism of testing?
I don't know how it works in Australia. I'm growing up in social housing, but I'll tell you what, your first subject to crime when I was growing up was you are 13 and an older kid would tell you, you give this package to that guy. If you get busted, the cops will let you off. It's your first offense, right?
Right.
It's your first offense. And then it becomes normalized because suddenly you have that connection to the underworld. My belief is that the first punishment of anything should always be the most severe, because then it acts as a deterrent, right? It acts as a deterrent. Suddenly, oh, just a line on a Friday when your mate's been banned 6 months for having a couple of ecstasy tablets in his pocket. You're going to think twice when your mate says, want a tablet? You're going to be like, oh, Jesus, my teammate. Nah. It's going to break that yes-no thing. But I also think that the education needs to be there. The protection needs to be there. Like if you're telling me that I can fuck up once and be protected, I think that's mindless. I think that's encouraging everyone to have one mistake. We should be encouraging 0 mistakes. We should be encouraging utopia. So for me, I think, yes, the test system needs to improve. The education needs to improve. But the consequences need to dramatically improve. And you mentioned mental health. I think mental health is this like grey area. But like the statistics behind mental health, I know the NHS ran a poll in 2022 during COVID. A staggering 77% of people polled in the greater city of London were defined by the NHS medically as needing counselling care, right? But because of the old attitude, toughen up, you'll be okay, suck it up, people didn't think it. And I think every mistake, black and white from my brain, is probably you need to transition the way you think. So ergo, good people don't do bad things, but they do in reality. So we have to have that education. There is something going on. Elijah being a young man, he knows not to do drugs. He's not stupid. Joel Smith knows not to do a line of cocaine before a final. He's not stupid. Do you know what I mean? He's not stupid. Do you know what I mean? It's like your kids. They know not to punch someone. They do those sometimes. So it's the education about making them. I think where the mental health comes in is it. Once you use that card, you either get sympathy or you get hate. But I look at it this way. It needs love. Everything loves. Love begats love. Hate begats hate. Yeah. So flip the narrative. These players and society, when you make a mistake, as soon as you own it, you need the pathway of redemption to open up. You can't hide that.
Mate, it's an important conversation and one I hope that we can continue to expand on. So those of you watching at home, share your thoughts on this situation. And I think more so the purpose of this is to document a conversation on how to move forward rather than continuing to look back. I do believe there is room for improvement in the way that we consume these stories, the way that we report these stories, and the way that we empathize with the players. I think slowly but surely we're getting closer and closer to our athletes because of the access we have to them. If you go to the football club or on social media, we have such a window into their lives now that we never used to have. And so I think with that presents a new set of challenges. So yeah, share with us your thoughts below.